Welcome back. This is lesson 2-2, overtime pay. Follow along in your notes on pages 2 and 3 of your packet. Our goal is to be able to calculate overtime pay. Some vocab to get familiar with listed on your screen: overtime pay, time and a half, and double time. For those of you who work jobs right now, this should be familiar. When you work more than the regular number of hours, you may earn something called overtime pay. Okay? You've probably heard of this at some point in your life, even if you do not have a job right now. Okay? Copy these words down with me on your blanks. The overtime rate, which is called, sometimes it's called time and a half, is usually 1.5 times your hourly rate, or 1.5 times your hourly rate. You may receive an overtime pay rate of double time, or twice your regular hourly rate for Sundays and holidays. Okay? We should be able to reason through these types of problems, but for those of you who prefer concrete steps, we have a couple formulas listed. Okay, overtime pay, the amount you will earn in overtime, equals your overtime rate, which is either 1.5, or if you're earning double time, then your rate would be 2. And you multiply that times the number of overtime hours worked. Okay, so we're going to take 2 or 1.5, multiply it times your hourly rate, so how much you make per hour, and then multiply it times the number of hours you worked. And then your total pay is going to equal your straight time pay, which we learned about last lesson, plus your overtime pay. Let's look at an example. Okay. Example 1, Alan is paid $8.20 an hour for the regular 40-hour week as a restaurant host. His overtime rate is 1.5 times his regular hourly rate. This week he worked his regular 40 hours plus 10 hours of overtime. What is his total pay? The task is to find his total pay. I've broken it down into steps for you that you can follow. Step 1 is to find the straight time pay. So he earns $8.20 an hour for his 40-hour week. So this week he worked his 40 hours. Let's figure out how much that would be. $8.20, the hourly rate, times the number of hours he worked, is going to tell us his straight time pay. Okay. That should give us $328. And then he works some overtime. Okay, so when he works overtime, he earns the $8.20 plus half. Okay, that's what time and a half means. Because his overtime rate is 1.5 up here, that's 1.5. We're going to use that in our overtime pay step. Okay, so to find the overtime pay, multiply the regular rate, $8.20, times the overtime rate, which is 1.5 times, and then times the number of overtime hours that he worked, which in this case is 10. Okay, multiply those three numbers together. And then it'll give us $123. So for regular hours, Alan earned $328. For overtime hours, he earned $123. If we add those together, it's going to give us the total pay. Okay, 328 plus 123 gives us $451. So a couple more steps involved than the last lesson, but still pretty straightforward. Okay. Pause the video while you try these two. Okay, hopefully you have paused the video, you have worked these problems out on your own. Number 1 says Josie makes $9 an hour. She worked 40 regular hours and 6 hours at time and a half. Find her total pay. Step 1, we're going to find her straight time pay. So $9 an hour for 40 hours. Her straight time pay is $360. Now her overtime pay, $9 an hour. And then she earns time and a half, so multiply times 1.5. And then she worked 6 hours overtime, so multiply that times 6. And when we multiply those three numbers together, we will get $81. Okay. But remember, the question's asking us the total pay. So the total is going to be those two numbers added together. Her straight time pay, 360 plus 81 equals $441. Example 2, Ed makes $11.50 an hour. This week, he worked 36 regular hours. I'm going to change colors when I underline for time and a half. If you're struggling with this concept, try to color code, okay? 7 hours at time and a half. Find his total pay. So straight time pay is going to be in red, $11.50 times the regular hours equals $414. Oops. Okay. And then now with overtime, I'm going to switch to blue. We have 7 hours of overtime. $11.50 is his regular rate, and he earns time and a half for overtime. 7 hours of overtime, when we multiply those three numbers together, $11.50 times 1.5 times 7, we will get $120.75. Okay, which means that our total pay for Ed, we need to add 414 plus 120.75. When we add those two numbers together, we should get $534.75. Okay. Second type of example with overtime pay, we need to do a bit of rearranging. So this example says, I'm going to turn on my highlighter, Selena is a receptionist at a hotel and conference center. She is paid $12.50 an hour for the regular 40-hour week. I'll switch colors for overtime. Her overtime pay is 1.5 times her regular hourly rate. This past week, she earned $612.50 in total pay. How many hours did she work? Okay, this time we're being asked to find how many hours. So I've broken it into steps for you. Use the total pay formula. So using this idea of total pay, we are going to break it down. Okay, so if her total pay amount is $612.50, that is equal to her straight time pay plus her overtime pay. Her straight time pay is $12.50 times 40 hours. $12.50 times 40 hours. Plus, her overtime pay is 1.5 times her regular hourly rate. So we know her regular hourly rate is $12.50. We know that she earns 1.5 times her regular hourly rate for overtime, but we just don't know how many hours she worked. Okay, so this is our equation that we're setting up. A lot going on here. We want to follow order of operations when we're solving this equation. So I'm going to keep my 612.50 on one side, and I'm gonna do some multiplication to clean up that next line. Okay, so 12.50 and 40, those are being multiplied together. And when they multiply together, it becomes 500. Okay, 12.50 times 1.5 is 18.75. And that is still being multiplied times h. Our task is to solve for h. So next thing we need to do is subtract 500 from both sides. We are subtracting 500 because we have a linear equation, and when we solve linear equations, we do reverse order of operations. Okay, so the 500 is being added, so we need to undo that. First, 612.50 minus 500 will give us 112.50. That is equal to 18.75 times h. Okay, remember that 1875 and h are being multiplied together. So in order to undo this multiplication, we need to divide. Okay, we need to divide both sides by 1875. Okay, divide both sides by 1875. Divide both sides by 1875. Change colors real quick for our final step. And when we divide both sides by 1875, 112.50 divided by 1875 gives us 6 for H. So she needs to work, or she worked 6 hours of overtime in this example. Okay. You might want a little more practice with these kinds of problems because there's a lot going on. Pause the video while you give these two a try. Okay, hopefully you have tried these problems, and if you got stuck, that's okay. We are going to work through them now, okay? So Corey earns $11.80 an hour for a regular 40-hour week. Okay, his overtime pay is time and a half. Last week he earned $613.60 in total pay. How many hours of overtime did he work? That is our task. How many hours? Okay, so remember, we can take our total pay. Oops. $613.60 is equal to straight time pay plus overtime pay. Straight time pay is $11.80 times his 40-hour work week. Plus the overtime pay that we're looking for is $11.80, his regular hourly rate, and he's earning time and a half for overtime, so we multiply times 1.5, and that is being multiplied by H. Now we're going to do a bit of cleaning up. Okay, $613.60 equals, when I multiply $11.80 times 40, I get $472. Goodness. 472. When I multiply 1180 times 1.5, I get 17.7 or 1770. $17.70 is his overtime rate. That's what that means. That's being multiplied times H. Next thing I want to do is subtract 472 from both sides. And that'll give me $613.60 minus 472 will give me 141.60, 141.6, which is equal to 17.7 times H. And our final step that we want to do is break up that multiplication between 17.7 and H. So let's divide both sides by 17.7. When we do so, we will get that H equals 8. So Corey worked 8 hours of overtime. Okay. Another example, just like the last ones, okay. Kevin earns straight time for 36 hours a week and double time for any hours more than 36 worked, okay. Last week, he worked a total of 42 hours and had a total pay of $545.28. What is the straight time pay? So this example is actually a little bit different, and we need to take a step back and consider what it is asking us, okay? So think about this for a second, okay? Straight time for 36 hours per week. We don't know the straight time pay, okay? I'm going to choose a letter to represent his straight time pay. That's our task, is to figure out what he makes hourly, okay? So in order to not get our hours and our hourly rates confused, I'm going to use W for the straight time pay for like wage. Let that be his hourly wage. So stick with this concept with me that total pay equals straight time pay plus overtime. Okay, so we know that the total pay was $545.28. We know that the straight time pay, we don't know the hourly rate, but we know that he worked for 36 hours, and each of those hours he was paid his hourly wage of W. So we're going to let that be represented by 36W, okay? For his overtime, we know that he earns double time for any more than 36 worked. So he worked 42 hours, which is 6 more than 36. So he worked 6 overtime hours. So this expression is going to be 6W times 2, because 2 is for the double time, 6 is for the number of overtime hours that he worked, and W represents that straight time hourly rate, okay? If you're confused by that, just let it sink in for a second. Okay, so we're going to simplify 36W. 6 times 2 gives us 12W. And that's equal to 545.28. So let me see if I can extend my page. There we go. So combine like terms on the right side to give you 48W. And that is still equal to 545.28. Now we want to undo our multiplication by dividing both sides by 48. Okay, when we do so, we will get what W is equal to. Which in this case is $11.36. Okay. If you're confused by that second example, it's good. It means that you're thinking. Okay. Take some time, practice assignment 2-2 overtime pay in Schoology.